my students will say, "How are you?" back, and they'll say it in the same tone as well as the same intonation. Or if I say, "Do you want candy?" they'll just say candy. They don't actually answer the question. So the echolalia, is just repeating back what they've heard rather than processing and responding to the question. I do see some have some aggressive behaviors, but not so much, and it's generally a frustration response because they can't communicate what is upsetting them or what they need. There's usually a need that's being missed when we have aggressive behavior. Sorry, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but I don't think so. I think does that answer your question?
Oh yeah,
okay,
for sure. Why is it important for an autistic child to receive a special education like the one that you provide?
For the case of most of the students in our program, they just really need the high ratio of staff to help keep their focus and the low number of students. We do have some instances where students work with other classes or go into other classes, but just the number and of students and the noise level and the amount of distraction is really too much for them to manage, so then they can't actually focus on their learning. So that's why it's really important just to have that extra support. And we do also things, we don't just work on academic skills, we work on social skills and daily living skills, like learning to brush their teeth and comb their hair and make food. We have a food program here where they learn to make their lunch and set the tables and empty the dishwasher. So functional skills where they don't often get the time to learn those things at home. And just, again, to generalize it in another location, they may learn how to empty the dishwasher at home, but to do it at school is a new thing, or if they were to have a job in the community, they have to learn that skill again and again. But it's just really, there are many children with autism and on the spectrum of autism that are integrated into a typical setting with some support, but because of the severity of the students that I have, they just really need a calmer environment. They could learn to manage and be in a classroom without having outbursts and behaviors, but they would never actually really learn many new skills because it'd just be too much, too overwhelming for them.
Oh, okay. What is the difference between a child who has autism and a child who has Asperger's syndrome?
As I said, autism is a spectrum, and there's a range. Most of the children that I work with have autism spectrum disorder, and they're the lower end of that spectrum. They have issues with communication, they have issues with social skills, they have issues with motor planning, sensory, sensitivity, sort of all of their areas of their life are affected. And as you move up that spectrum towards the Asperger's end of the spectrum, there are less areas that are affected. Most people with Asperger's syndrome are highly intelligent, have all the functional daily living skills and that sort of thing, but just have a deficit in social skills in that sort of area. So they can function in a school environment. They may need some extra supports, whereas on the lower end of the spectrum, where the kids in my class are, they need support in all areas, and you can have anywhere in between there. A deficit maybe just in communication and social, or a deficit just in sensory, and they'd still be on the autism spectrum.
Okay, so if you were to think about the character Christopher Boone in the novel, would you say that he has autism spectrum disorder, or would he be more on the Asperger's side?
I think, and I haven't read this book in a while, but I think he's closer to the Asperger's spectrum of it.
Okay.
Just some little odd behaviors but he can function in a daily life and communicate. But he just, doesn't like yellow trucks or whatever,
Yeah.
from what I remember in the book, and has, some very particular things. Whereas, this lower end of the spectrum, they need support in almost every area.
Okay. Would you say that it's common for a child with autism to be aggressive?
It's not common, and it's actually becoming less and less common as the students that we're seeing are getting more and more support at a younger age and getting things like iPods and more communication devices. I think the aggression comes from the inability to communicate, and then a frustration because they want something or they need something and they can't say or tell us what it is, or that they're just too overwhelmed by the sensory stuff and they just can't say, I need to get out of here, I need a break. That's something that we teach our kids, is most of them have either a pick symbol or something, that if they just need to get away and get a break, then they can use that. Where if that need goes unmet, then that's when you get the aggressive behaviors. But it's becoming less and less common, and there's always a reason. If you look back, there's always a reason behind it. It's not, and it's generally just either overwhelmed sensory or frustration because they're not being able to communicate their needs.
Okay.
I think that, if you see, there was a guy that was on the transit in Toronto not so long ago that had, the bus driver got mad at him, and he wasn't aggressive. I don't think he was aggressive anyway, but he just had a big meltdown because he needed something that he wasn't getting the response that